I'm 74 years old, and I need to say something out loud while I still can. I spent most of my life trying to earn approval that never came, and only now do I see how much of myself I gave away for it. I'm not saying this because I want sympathy. I'm saying it because time has narrowed my world, and when things get quiet like this, the truth gets louder. These days, my mornings are slow. I wake up earlier than I need to, not because I'm rested, but because my mind doesn't let me sleep in anymore. I sit at the edge of the bed longer than I used to. I feel the stiffness in my knees. I listen to the house. There's no one else making noise. That silence didn't arrive suddenly. It crept in over decades while I was busy being useful, dependable, and agreeable. When you're young, you think approval is love. You think if people nod at you, praise you, rely on you, then you're doing something right. That's what I thought. And no one told me otherwise, because from the outside, my life looked fine. I had a job people respected. I showed up on time. I didn't complain much. I did what was asked of me, and often more. I learned early that being easy to work with made life smoother. Fewer arguments, fewer raised voices, less risk. Risk scared me more than I admitted. I grew up believing that approval was safety. If teachers liked you, you stayed out of trouble. If bosses approved of you, you kept your job. If family thought you were responsible, you were left alone to live your life. So I tried to be the kind of person no one could criticize. In my 20s, that felt like maturity. I wasn't reckless. I didn't chase wild dreams. I picked a practical path, a steady career, a sensible routine. People said I had a good head on my shoulders. I carried those words with me like proof I was doing life correctly. What I didn't notice was how often I swallowed my own thoughts, how often I nodded when I disagreed, how often I stayed quiet because speaking up felt selfish or dangerous. I told myself there would be time later to figure out what I really wanted. In my 30s, life got louder. Responsibilities stacked up. Bills, expectations, routines, days blurred together. I got good at being busy. Being needed felt like purpose. If someone depended on me, it meant I mattered. I missed things during those years, not in dramatic ways. Just small absences. I came home late, more often than I should have. I postponed conversations. I assumed people understood my intentions without me saying anything. I told myself that sacrifice was part of being an adult. There were moments when something inside me resisted, a quiet discomfort, a feeling that I was drifting away from myself, but I pushed it aside. I told myself that doubt was childish, that real adults didn't question their choices, they endured them. Approval rewarded endurance. By my 40s, I was tired in a way sleep didn't fix. But I had built a reputation by then. Reliable, solid, the kind of person others leaned on. Letting go of that felt impossible. If I changed, who would I be? I kept choosing what kept the peace. I avoided conflict. I said yes when I meant no. I smiled when I felt hollow. I believed that if I kept doing the right things, eventually the approval would turn into something warmer, something lasting. It didn't. The cost didn't show up as one big loss. It showed up as distance, as relationships that stayed polite but shallow, as conversations that never went deeper than schedules and responsibilities. I wasn't lonely then. I was surrounded by people, but I was rarely known. There's a difference. I remember sitting at a dinner table one evening, years ago, surrounded by familiar faces, and realizing no one there really knew what I thought about anything important. Not because they didn't care, because I had never let them see it. That realization passed. I cleared the dishes. I went back to work the next day. Life continued. That's how regret grows. Quietly, patiently, waiting. In my 50s, time started to feel faster. Weeks vanished. Years folded in on themselves. People talked about retirement like it was a distant shore. I assumed that's when life would finally slow down. That's when I'd reflect. That's when I'd be honest. I still believed there would be time. Then things began to change. A parent got sick. A friend passed away unexpectedly. Someone I assumed would always be there wasn't. These moments shook me, but not enough to change me. I mourned, adjusted, and returned to my patterns. I told myself grief made people emotional. I told myself I'd think clearly later. Later kept moving. The turning point didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived in a hospital room, watching someone I loved struggle to speak, knowing there were conversations we had postponed for decades. Words we assumed we could exchange someday. Someday didn't come. I sat there holding a hand that felt smaller than I remembered, and I understood something with terrifying clarity. Approval doesn't show up at the end of your life to thank you. It doesn't sit by your bed. It doesn't tell you that you did enough. It's just an idea you chased. After that, the world felt thinner. I went through the motions, but something had cracked open. I started noticing how much of my life had been shaped by avoiding disapproval rather than pursuing meaning. When I finally retired, people congratulated me. They said I'd earned rest. They said I could finally enjoy myself. I smiled. I nodded. I didn't tell them that I didn't know what I enjoyed anymore. When your identity is built on being approved of, retirement is disorienting. There's no one to impress, no one to reassure you that you're doing things right. That's when the silence truly settled in. Days stretched. I filled them with errands, habits, small distractions. But without the noise of obligation, the questions returned. Who was I beneath all the compliance? What did I want that I never allowed myself to want? At 74, these questions don't feel exciting. They feel heavy. Some things can't be fixed now. Relationships that drifted apart don't always find their way back. People build lives without you when you're not fully present in theirs. Time doesn't rewind to give you a second chance at honesty. I can't reclaim the years I spent shrinking myself to be acceptable. I can't redo conversations I avoided. I can't tell younger versions of myself to be braver. All I can do is speak now. If you're listening to this and you're younger than me, I don't want you to think I wasted my life. I didn't. I worked. I cared. I tried to be decent, but I lived carefully, and careful living has a cost. Approval is a poor substitute for connection. It feels safer, but it's thinner. It doesn't nourish you. It just keeps you from being questioned. I wish I had known that being misunderstood is sometimes the price of being known. That disappointing people doesn't mean you're wrong. That silence can be just as damaging as conflict. No one ever sat me down and said these things, so I'm saying them now. You don't need to rebel against your life. You don't need to abandon responsibility. But you do need to notice when you're living for permission instead of truth. I thought if I waited long enough, approval would turn into peace. It didn't. Peace comes from alignment, not applause. These days, I'm gentler with myself. Not because I've figured everything out, but because there's no point in punishing someone who did the best they knew how with what they were given. I sit by the window more now. I watch people pass by. I wonder what they're postponing, what they're telling themselves they'll address later. Later is fragile. If this meant something to you, you don't need to do anything dramatic. Just be honest, a little sooner than I was. Say the thing that keeps getting delayed. Notice who you're becoming while you're trying to be approved of. I don't have many years left. I know that now. And strangely, that knowledge has brought a kind of calm. I don't need approval anymore. I just needed the truth, even if it arrived late. Thank you for listening to an old man finally telling it straight.